Is your brain next level? Do you sometimes feel like it's your superpower? Recently, I had a patient tell me, sometimes I know things that I feel like I'm not supposed to know. And I thought, yep, that's exactly what it feels like sometimes when you're a highly sensitive person. And those differences are based on differences in our brain. So let's have a look at 3 of the differences in the brains of highly sensitive people. Hi, I'm Ashton. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I'm an HSP myself, and I specialize in working with highly sensitive people. So today I'm just going to talk about 3 differences that are connected to neurotransmitters. When I was researching the neurodiversity in brains of highly sensitive people, this stuff got really heady. So if you're not into neuroscience, that's cool. I get it. And if you're curious how your brain is different and why it can be your superpower, have a listen. And have a listen to the end because I'm going to go over all 3. Okay, so the first one is a difference in your serotonin levels. And I'm not going to go to the science behind the genes and the variants in the genes and what that means. It just means we have differences, simply put, differences in these 3 neurotransmitters I'm going to talk about. The first one is serotonin. And your serotonin is the neurotransmitter that's responsible for mood regulation. And highly sensitive people tend to have lower levels of serotonin, but that does not actually mean that we're more depressed, because it's not actually the serotonin itself. It's a transporter gene connected to serotonin. And so while it was once thought having this genetic variation was responsible for increased levels of depression, it's actually more responsible to being sensitive to your environment. And what that means specifically is a concept called differential susceptibility. So highly sensitive people are more impacted by their childhood. So that means if you grew up in a loving, caring childhood with support, most likely you're thriving even more than somebody who doesn't have the trait. However, if you grew up in a childhood where you weren't supported or where there was abuse or neglect, chances are you might have a higher level of depression because of that. So another way that I like to think about how our environment is important to us, for me, one thing I thought of was a hotel room. So I hear people say, lots of my friends who aren't highly sensitive, like, oh, I don't care about my hotel so much. It's just where I lay my head. And for me, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. My hotel room is incredibly important to me because I'm really sensitive to my environment. So it needs to be comfortable. It needs to be quiet. It needs to feel safe. I mean, same goes with my home. My home is my sacred space. I think that's another reason why nature has such an impact for highly sensitive people, because we are sensitive to our environments. So that's the first difference in neurotransmitters, is a difference in our serotonin. The second difference in neurotransmitters has to do with dopamine. So let me be clear. I don't think that the research is actually fully clear with any of this. And the research is actually pretty new when it comes to researching what is involved in being a highly sensitive person. But they are finding links between these 3 neurotransmitters, including dopamine. And dopamine is the neurotransmitter that is responsible for our reward system. And so what they're finding is that highly sensitive people are not as driven by external rewards. And this actually is confusing to me, which I'm going to tell you in just a second. So the examples that I was reading is, it seems like people without the trait are rewarded in, high, I'm just going to use the word chaotic, like high chaotic environments where maybe it's a lot of stimulation, a lot of noise, bustling, people talking. But for highly sensitive people, we're pretty much repelled by those environments. And so this difference in dopamine is there kind of as a protective mechanism so that we aren't driven to go to these overstimulating environments. And I'll give the example of going out to eat. I'm having the hardest time trying to find a restaurant that's not super loud. And it doesn't make any sense to me that the restaurants, the acoustics are terrible. It's all hardwood or tile floors with high ceilings, and the restaurants are playing really loud music and everybody's talking really loudly. And for me, that's so overwhelming and I don't enjoy it at all. But I'm noticing that so many restaurants, if not all of them, are doing it. So it must be enjoyable for the other 80% of people who don't have the trait. But here's the part that's confusing to me. And if you're a researcher or you know about the dopamine connection in highly sensitive people, please drop a comment in the comment section and say, link me to some more research that might clarify this. So dopamine is also responsible for some addiction. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter that gets activated with certain substances, caffeine, for example. Cocaine is another example. And highly sensitive people are actually more sensitive to the effects of caffeine. But you would think that if we are not driven by external rewards, that we would not have problems with addiction or with substance abuse. And although the preliminary research, there doesn't seem to be a link between highly sensitive people and substance abuse. Anecdotally, in my private practice, I see a lot of substance abuse among highly sensitive people. So that's the part that's a little confusing to me with that dopamine connection there. Okay, so far we have serotonin and we have dopamine. And the last neurotransmitter that's different is norepinephrine. And this neurotransmitter is partly responsible for our vivid emotionality, right? So highly sensitive people are impacted stronger emotionally, and we tend to have a greater awareness of other people's emotions. And this has a lot to do with this variant in the gene that's connected to norepinephrine. So you could even say that highly sensitive people have a brighter palette of colors for emotionality. If you find that to be true for you, like you just experience life more vividly, drop a comment in the comment section. I'd love to know. And if you're finding value in this video, consider subscribing or sharing. Hit the like button. So today we talked about 3 neurotransmitters that are partly responsible for having a brain that is next level: serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. And if that's too heady for you and you don't want to have to remember that, you can just remember, hey, my brain is neurodivergent. It's different. And along with that comes some really cool things. So remember, when you understand your sensitivity, you too can claim it as your greatest asset.